This particular podcast will go over an introduction to the sport of team handball, specifically how you would teach team handball in a high school physical education setting. It'll look at three key things, the first being the rules and guidelines and a general overview, particularly on how you would modify the sport to play in a traditional high school. Second, basic shots and skills that you would teach to students, and then a brief discussion of different modified game forms that you would use in teaching the sport. So first, let's take a look at the sport of team handball overall. And so we'll show a clip here from the 2009 club championships. Notice the game itself is really a combination of skills that are used in soccer, skills that are used in basketball, and overall throwing skills. The game itself is very fast-paced, as you can see. It's predominantly a passing game. So even though dribbling is utilized in the sport, it's not as readily utilized as passing as far as moving the ball. The pace of the game is very quick, as you can tell, but overall it's a very fast-paced and quick-moving sport. So let's look at the guidelines on how this game is played. Of course, the objective of team handball is to throw the ball into the goal, getting it past the goalie and score. Very similar to kicking the ball past the goalie or heading the ball past the goalie in soccer. Team play is 6-on-6. Players can move freely throughout the playing area. There's no restrictions as to where players can move and can't move. The game itself in tournament play is two 30-minute halves with a 10-minute intermission. The clock is continuous, so there are no timeouts or no stops of the clock if the ball goes out of bounds. The court itself officially is 132 by 65, which is slightly larger than the standard basketball court, which is 94 by 50. However, in the school settings, using a traditional basketball court is probably the most recommended dimensions to use, because that's basically what's available. There's a goal area, and basic rules and regulations are that no one can go inside the goal area except for the goalie. It's marked by a semicircle that's 6 meters away from the goal post, which is approximately 19 feet. The best modification to use for that than in a high school setting is to use the three-point line as the goal area. And so no one is allowed inside the three-point line area except for the goalie in gameplay in a high school setting or traditional setting. There's a free throw line too that is 9 meters from the goal post. And free throw lines are used in penalty situations, which we'll talk about what that means in a minute. At approximately 30 feet away, usually a three-point line could do that, or you could use a line between the three-point line and half court, as you would establish as the free throw area in a high school setting. So basic penalties. Free throws are awarded for minor infractions, like a player gets inside the goal area, traveling beyond 3 steps. Minor fouls and minor contact. What really happens in this situation is that the ball changes possession, so the opposing team takes over. They take the ball out on the baseline after that infraction, and they're given the first throw in bounds on a free throw. A 7-meter throw is similar to shooting a foul shot in basketball. So basically this is a one-on-one shot between the person and the goalie. It's usually awarded for major fouls concerning contact, things of that nature. And so similar to how a foul would be in basketball, an easy modification is to use some of the same parameters, that if someone fouls someone when shooting, they receive a 7-meter throw, because that's very similar to how it works in the sport. A referee throw is very similar to a jump ball. Happens in the context of simultaneous possession, or 2 players having the ball at the same time, or if the ball touches the ceiling or something outside the court that interferes with play. A goal throw is where the ball goes into the goalie area and the goalie is going to put it back in play. In this situation, the first pass out to a teammate is allowed without defense, and so the goalie may throw the first pass without defense, and then defense takes over from there. A throw off is used to begin play. Same rules apply here. The first pass is allowed without defense. How it basically works is to begin the game is that everyone's lined up at half court, and from half court the first pass takes place and then play begins. As far as severe fouls or suspensions, there is a penalty box similar to what's used in hockey or floor hockey, to where if someone aims an action at an opponent and not the ball, such as body contact, repeated violations of rules, unsportsmanlike conduct, all those result in a 2-minute suspension. Basically a 2-minute penalty box. The team plays with 5 players versus 6. If a person accumulates 3 2-minute suspensions in one game, they're disqualified from participation. So just to kind of show a diagram on how things are set up. Notice in the goal area, I use a basketball court here to show what high school might look like. Goal area would be anything inside that 3-point line. For the 7-meter throw, you can use the top of the key or also the timeline, which is noted as a hash mark, as you notice on the side of the court. It's located here. That's a hash mark that's really kind of, so you could put, one of the best ways would be to put a piece of tape here that's equivalent with a timeline and use that as your 7-meter throw. Play begins here, that everyone from the defensive team sets up, the offensive team lines up at half court. The first pass takes place here, and then play begins. So let's look at some of the key shots that you would teach as part of the sport. And this particular handout is also contained on Canvas for you to be able to go over that. It goes over some of the basic things I've talked about so far, but let's look in particular at shooting. So one of the first key passes that you teach in team handball is the overhead pass. The overhead pass is very similar to the same used in baseball, many sports. One of the differences is the diameter of the ball, of course, is a lot larger. So you're not able to, the ball is more cupped in the hand versus being able to have fingers spread around it like you can in baseball or softball. Key things to teach in this: fingertip grip, that elbow flex at 90 degrees abducted from the shoulder. Weight shift starts on the back foot, shifts to the front foot as the shoulders rotate perpendicular to the target. Student steps towards the target, leading with the elbow. Notice the elbow ahead of the wrist here. Weight shifts onto the front foot. Throwing arm continues in a downward motion. So very similar to passing that you teach there, but it's important to review, and because the ball diameter makes this pass different in the sport. Other types of pass, a pass that's used quite often in team handball, is the wrist pass. The wrist pass itself is basically a sidearm flick of the ball. The step, instead of going forward, the step goes lateral or sideways. The ball starts in front of the body with 2 hands. Someone with smaller hands can actually keep the opposite hand on the ball. So if you're throwing the ball right-handed, for example, you may keep the left hand on the ball to help push it diagonally and then flip off the hand if it's difficult to hold on to. Players with large enough hands to be able to palm the ball, it's usually a one-handed pass. Both hands start, and then one hand either throws to the right or left, depending on whether the person's right or left-handed. It's a lateral step towards the target. The key is that the elbow goes, thumb goes down, elbow goes up towards the target. There's a flip of the wrist, and the ball is pushed with the thumb. The passing arm then is extended. Weight shifts, as you notice, laterally from one foot to the other. Catching, 2 types of catching you would teach is catching above the waist. So you want to review using a triangle as a target, catching the ball using both hands. Similar to that, you use a sandwich catch, and ultimate, it's good to teach this type of catching because it increases the success level of your students. So watch the ball, making sure you move the body to align with the ball to make sure the ball's caught in front of the chest. Receiving with flex and bringing the ball to the chest to protect it. Where a difference in catching below the waist, whereas catching above the waist, you use teaching this particular, let me scan back just a minute, teaching this particular triangle catching pattern here. Below the waist, important one to teach is pinkies together. So they teach below the waist catching this way. So watching the ball, lining the ball with the body again, moving into position, pinkies together as you catch the ball, bringing it close to the body because it's important to protect the ball in this particular sport. A progression then going to catching while running. So applying that triangle or pinkies together depending on the location of the ball while running. So using different drills or types of progressions where you run and catch and run and throw are important because it is a quick moving running sport and you have to throw on the run. And then different types of shooting. One key thing to remember and review here before we go into the other types of shooting is the dribbling rule. Basically, you're allowed 3 steps or 3 seconds of possession with the ball. After that 3 seconds, you either have to dribble or pass. So what can happen with maximum movement is that you may have the ball for as much as 6 seconds. You can take 3 steps, you can dribble as many times as you want, and take an additional 3 steps once you pick up the dribble, or each in one of those situations have it 3 seconds. So it could be 3 seconds, dribble, 3 seconds, then you have to pass or shoot. Could be 3 steps, dribble and move as many times as you want, take another 3 steps and then pass or shoot. You're not allowed to do this cycle more than once before giving up possession of the ball. Dribbling is another key skill you can review, very similar to basketball. One of the big differences, of course, is the size of the ball. So key cues are listed here for teaching dribbling. Shooting. A couple, 3 types of shots that you would teach. The first one being the set shot. Set shot is very similar to an overhead throw. One of the key things to remember, though, with a set shot is where it's located. You don't want to work on teaching a set shot going to the center of the goal, because that's where the goalie is. You want to work on set shots to corners, bottom corners, top corners of the goal, where they're the most difficult to defend. And so with set shots, if you're teaching shooting drills, you really want to focus on having students shoot at the corners of the goal, not shoot at the center. The jump shot itself is a little more complex. The jump shot is slightly different because the takeoff is same leg and as your throwing arm. So you're jumping off, if you're right-handed, you're jumping off the left foot as you're executing this throw. It's taken from a run, so there are 3 steps as you run in, and then you jump off the opposite foot into the air, executing the throw extended overhead. So notice the difference between this throw and a standard set shot is that the arm is extended, not at 90 degrees to the body. So it's an overhead, over the top of the shoulder throw. What happens is this: you drive the opposite knee to receive height, you execute the throw from above, and so notice the step in opposition is still there, it's just taking place in the air. And so you're driving off the right knee, and then the left leg comes forward as you throw, landing on the left foot on the floor. So this is a skill that is a little more complex to teach. It's a very important skill to learn in team handball because it's one of the most effective shots coming in at goal. A couple of things to remember as far as rules and overall guidelines in teaching this sport. One of the biggest ones for safety is that either eliminate the goalie in gameplay situations or put in a bounce rule at the high school level. In other words, the ball must bounce off the floor before it goes into the goal, so there's not a direct shot or direct throw on goalie. It can be a very dangerous sport to do that without that rule modification. With this particular game, many of the traditional games you use or modified games that you use in Ultimate Frisbee would be very good lead-ups. Multiple passing games, doing Ultimate Frisbee to where it's to an end zone, using the handball, numbered passing, things of that nature are very good games to use. With this, modified games where you take out the goalie, require multiple different types of passes, and so many of the traditional games that you use in many other sports can work with this. Also, different types of throwing and catching games as well. But overall, it's a great sport to teach at the high school level because it combines sports that they've had a lot of exposure to. They've usually had a lot of exposure to soccer, and they've had a lot of exposure to basketball, a lot of exposure to baseball, softball. You kind of combine components of all that together with the throwing motions used in softball, baseball, the shooting at goal, aspects used in soccer and the passing and dribbling components that are used in basketball. So it's a great overall sport activity.